Hello, guys and gals, me, Mudahar, and, before we begin, I just want to say it, I finished that TV show Dexter, and by God, how do you have a terrible ending? And then I watched the sequel series to it, Dexter, New Blood, and just for the Dexter fans, whoever's watching it, how do you have two endings to a show that are both simultaneously bad? Okay? Anyways, I just wanted to get that out of the system. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, YouTube is not my job. My real life job has me actually doing real life, grown-up, boring behavior. And a lot of that grown-up, boring behavior has me looking at things like tariffs, okay? Yeah, this is something that I've been kind of seeing for the last couple days, and honestly, from the context of video games, I actually have a fair bit to talk about. But, ladies and gentlemen, over the last couple days, I've been seeing, again, just constant warfare on the internet and amongst, general people talking about how evil these tariffs are, how good tariffs are. I've actually made videos talking about just Canada in general, okay? There's some wild stuff going here. But before this video, I want to just stress off one thing real quick. I don't want to turn this into a political turf war in the comment section. In fact, I'm not an expert at any of this stuff, okay? I'm just somebody that's a very interested learner. I'm a very interested person, but I've got a few things to say. So, as I was waking up every day, I usually see a financial map every day. Now, a financial map is something that looks like this, okay? So this morning, I woke up and I saw all green boxes, okay? Now, green boxes means good. That means if you put money into Apple, right? That Apple investment you made just jumped up 4.4%, okay? So depending on how much money you have in a company like Apple, that 4% could be, like, if you put in $100, you went to $104. If you put in $1 million, well, you can imagine how 4% changes the higher your stake in a position really is. Now, the thing I hate about this kind of stuff is, generally speaking, I always look at people posting these maps as like weird owns on each other. So this is the financial map today, okay? Yeah, it all ended with a lot of red, okay? Now, red, for anybody wondering, is not good, okay? Red means that if something was worth like $100, it now lost 5% of its value. So when this whole bracket goes red across every single industry, you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, it ain't that fucking good, okay? Now, for a lot of people that have money invested, okay, that could mean that they've lost millions of dollars, okay? I read somewhere that Aiden Ross, I don't know how true this is, apparently that guy lost $10 million in the market, and I would not be surprised, okay? So, yeah, this is something that I've seen, and obviously a lot of this has to do with that word tariff, okay? Now, again, I'm a gaming guy. I'm somebody that talks about video games, but I can explain a tariff real quick, okay? So when I was in high school, when I was in college, the way that I learned it through an econ class was effectively it's when one country puts a bit of a import tax on a good, right? So let's say that you're buying a brand new, a processor from a company, right? Let's say you're buying a new GPU. Now, the components inside the GPU are made all over the world, okay? But in that case, in a lot of gaming cases, a lot of those actual components are made in countries like China or maybe even Taiwan. Now, this is the webpage of a company known as TSMC, which, again, for anybody that doesn't know, this is one of the few companies in the world, one of the largest manufacturers, fabricators of computer chips, semiconductors, basically the things that make the world go round. So let's say, all right, back in the day, all right, one of my professors said that you can't call somebody dumb as rocks, okay? Because if you actually look at how computer chips are made, right, taking silicon, taking what are rocks, going through a very complicated set of procedures to turn that rock, to turn that silicon into a computer chip is actually a marvel of fucking human engineering. It's insane to the point that I've researched this, professionally, and I still can't even begin to tell you how this stuff actually works or how human beings even fucking figured out how to take rocks and make them process, insane things like the ability for this camera to record this video in 4K and store it. For the autofocus on this camera to consistently fuck up requires an engineer to put together a computer chip that lets this system do so. And that goes for all the technology we have around it. It's truly fascinating, okay? It's great shit. Now, obviously, we live in a world where when you're producing cameras, monitors, computers, really many things, we all take bits and pieces from each other. So moral here is obviously, let's say you're, I guess the United States, you're importing a Nintendo Switch or a GPU or whatever. You bring it into your country, and let's say that your administration put in like a 50% tariff, right? Whatever it is. That means that the country bringing in the product has to go, okay, the company that imports has to go, all right, we can either eat the cost and give the person, this GPU, but basically we have to pay this, tariff out of pocket, because usually the company that imports pays the actual, whatever the tariff comes out to be, to the import agency of the country that has the tariff set. And that means that, again, the company could either pass the savings on to you, meaning that they can eat the cost of the tariff and just sell you the GPU as if none of this existed. Obviously, in business sense, that makes no fucking sense whatsoever. You pass the 50% off to your customer because ultimately you tell them this is just how the market is. You're going to have to pay up the tariff. That basically means if you're the person buying a good, you have to pay up whatever the country sets. Now, at the end of all this, I've seen a lot of people use tariff as like this nasty, evil word. And the thing about it is, like many things that are, centered around economy, a lot of the things that keep our world functioning, it's complex, okay? Tariffs are not this evil thing. From what I've learned in economy, whether it be in, my time in college, it was always that if used properly, if used surgically, it actually has a lot of benefits. For instance, sometimes if you apply a tariff, you can convince people who manufacture in other countries to think, maybe we'll just bring it back home. And that's kind of a good thing. That means there's a lot of jobs that come home. There's a lot of good stuff that happens to the people back home. But they can also be used to protect your industries, right? There's multiple types of tariffs. There's over quota stuff, meaning that, let's say that you have a agreement with a country. It's like, all right, let's say that chicken, right? Ground chicken meat. Let's talk about 1 million pounds every year. Instead of one country over flooding the other country and fucking up prices, you apply over quota stuff. Look, it's getting complicated, all right? It really is. But the point I'm trying to make here is that obviously this is a complicated, the economy is complicated. It really is. That's why people go to fucking university for it. So again, the way that it's being done right now, it appears, in the world is it's kind of like taking a sledgehammer to the entire world's economy and just going to fucking town. Which from every economist that I've talked to, whether it be in relation to this video or just outside for my own interest, has really not been the best way to do it. But honestly, these things really require you to have 10 years of thinking to go ahead and see where the world is, again, a decade from now, okay? What's happening today will ultimately matter on what happens in the year 2036, okay? Around there. So that's kind of basically where it's come out to. And looking around on a lot of technology, apparently it was like also brought up that companies like Apple, which sell what appear to be grossly expensive iPhones anyways, if they decided to apply these tariffs, which it really seems like it does, these iPhones, if they were forced to be completely manufactured on our side of the world, would cost something around an insane $30,000 price tag. Now, I'm not so much an expert on this, but obviously when you're talking about, good labor prices, when you're talking about actually developing the chips at home and all of this stuff, it can be tough. It can be very, very complicated. That's why things like supply chains, that's why things exist all around us. Now, obviously, if you're somebody who's developing computer chips, all right, the problem with this is it's not like many other goods. Computer chips, like I told you, a few minutes ago, there's very few companies that make computer chips. And there's even fewer companies that make computer chips at the best possible quality. And one of those companies is TSMC, who appears to be pretty much targeted in this process. Now, for a company that produces chips for pretty much the entirety of the world, yeah, you can imagine when these things get brought up, when they're the ones getting punished, that punishment eventually will just ripple onto you. So for the world of video gamers, this means that for a lot of our technology, whether it be our phones, whether it be our gaming consoles, whether it be our GPUs, whether it be anything in our tech field, it's about to jump a whole lot more expensive, unless, of course, the world starts getting along more and more and more, which is not as simple as one would think.
So looking into the biggest retailers for video games, something like GameStop, they were even saying that they were going to hold back
and evolving
on pre-orders,
market conditions.
Nintendo
just
will
to see
update timing
at a later date,
because obviously
launch,
as somebody
however,
importing this stuff,
unchanged.
you have to see how you can even still make money on this, given the already obscene markup that's coming just from the government.
So a lot of these companies appear to have actually been shipping their product to the United States in advance of a lot of these things going live. Apparently, companies like Apple decided to fly in like 5 plane loads of iPhones to at least dodge a bunch of these tariffs, so they could have inventory in the country before this shit went live, so they could actually sell them and keep their companies effectively afloat. Now, if you're in any of these countries and you're looking at what your reciprocal tariffs are, this is exactly what's being brought up. And from any economist that I've read and how this is basically placed out, it's not entirely as simple as one would think. According to the actual community note here, the tariffs aren't based on actual foreign tariffs, but likely on the trade deficit divided by imports. So again, they have actual data for you to verify and look for yourself. But yeah, none of this is done in a tactical manner, right? It's kind of just, slammed in. And realistically, it's just kind of throwing the world up for a bit of a tizzy. And, because Canada is literally about to be, what, the 52nd state or some shit? Or 51st, whatever the hell we are. Yeah, apparently we've also gotten delays in that pre-order. Now, I never say to pre-order any product, but I was actually a little bit surprised at this. Obviously, Canada and Japan and Vietnam, the 3 countries involved in a Nintendo Switch's, production chain, at least for, Nintendo and Canada to be together. Yeah, this never involved the guys down in the States. So I immediately started wondering, I'm like, what are we doing here? So immediately for Canadians, because of our friends down south, we also can't pre-order the Nintendo Switch. Now, again, this isn't that big of a deal for me because, again, I always am pretty much against pre-ordering anything like this. But I'm wondering if Nintendo, the company who's one of their leaders, I believe, ended up coming out and just going, yeah, we know the Switch 2's really expensive. That's why we have the Switch 1 for you. Okay, Don Matrick, bringing me back to the old Xbox release again. Oh yeah, if you can't, the Xbox One ain't working for you, just get the 360, baby. It's all good. Yeah, for a company like Nintendo to be effectively doing this, all right, I really feel like it's not just the idea of the tariff. I really think it's going to be Nintendo upcharging these prices for everyone around the world. So it's going to be in a product that's genuinely more expensive for Americans because it's just costing more in general to import the product to the country. But let's say this is priced at, I don't know, $500-$600 US. That's, if I convert $600 US to Canadian, if we go at the tariff pricings, we're looking at 855 Canadian dollars, okay, dropped into this nonsense, which basically makes a system that I was kind of thinking of getting, basically a system that I won't be getting, okay, because that's just way too much money to be spending on something that I won't be using as much as a Steam Deck or my PC. And if it comes down to playing Metroid at 4K 60 frames per second, well, ladies and gentlemen, I might just have to emulate it, okay? It's simple as that. Now, I think as a video gamer, it's kind of luxurious to be sitting over here and kind of pondering, man, my video game price is about to get a little bit higher because of the government getting this involved. But the thing is, in general, a lot of stuff is starting to get more expensive, and the tariffs are just one factor into it. The more and more the international market gets pretty fucked up, the scarier it becomes for, again, the average person to really be stretching their, dollar. For a lot of you guys watching over here, ladies and gentlemen, I know we have a goofy time where we talk about it, but genuinely speaking, this may be the time where it probably is the most important thing to cut back on your spending and to have some money saved up, because I really do think that there's going to be some pretty bad knock-on effects from this, at least in the short term, and I think everyone's kind of agreed that in the short term it's not that good looking. So again, it's actually a luxury to be thinking of video game prices, and I thank God every day that I can kind of do that. But for the average person who's thinking about, their rent, their food, basically everything that they need to stay alive, which effectively are just those 2 things, they already are getting to a point where purchasing them was already tough before any of this started, but afterwards, because of how fucked up the markets really are, it can be genuinely a bit of a headache, I believe, for people to be dealing with. In fact, it wasn't really all that shocking that I started to see people post the fucking suicide hotline in a lot of these investing forums, right? Or a lot of these investing Reddit boards because of how wild the market really is. And genuinely speaking, if you are thinking like that, definitely should talk to somebody else, definitely should be calling up a hotline, definitely should know that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. But I usually don't really like making videos like this, even though they are actually pretty, they do pretty well in the system anyways. People do like to watch this kind of stuff. But generally, I'm not an expert on it, but I am smart enough to know the actual effects out of it, and I do see a lot of misinformation brought up because of people constantly yelling at each other about this stuff, or trying to politicize a topic that, really I think is a great reason for people to learn about their economy, learn about how the world works, and hopefully, as they learn about these things, maybe also develop some fucking solutions for it. So yeah, our video games are getting more expensive, but in general, everything's getting more expensive. Trust me, I see the effect of tariffs every single day that I go to my job at fucking 8 o'clock in the morning, and I got to be doing my morning calls for businesses here and across the border. It's not a fun time, is what it is. But ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. If you learned something, let me know. If you didn't, let me know, and I'll make better videos that'll at least get you something out of the door. Because ladies and gentlemen, even if you hate me, at least you hopefully learned something today. I am out.